It is one of the focal areas of UNOSDP. And borrowing from Mandela's quote on the power of sport, where I quote, "Sport speaks to youth in a language that they understand." It is but befitting that we start off the conference with the plenary focusing on youth development. Our moderator for the plenary is Dr. Deepa Narayan, Managing Director, E3 Global Advisory Services. Dr. Narayan has worked on global poverty issues for the last 25 years with international organizations and civil society. She was recently named as one of the 100 most influential global thinkers by the US Foreign Policy magazine, as one of the 35 great minds by India Today magazine, and one of the 100 disruptive heroes to bring about changes in large organizations by hackers' work in the US. She is a member of the Indian Global Advisory Council of the World Economic Forum. She's written over 15 books, many of which, especially the Voices of the Poor series, have been bestsellers in the poverty and development field. I can go on and on. She's achieved so much and many more miles to cross and horizons to overcome. Dr. Deepa Narayan, please join us on the stage. I'd also like to call in all the panelists for the session. Stephen John Fleming, co-founder and chief executive, Kick for Life. Please join us on the stage, Steve. Brian Suskovics, chief executive strategist, coaches across continents. We've had a sumptuous lunch. I'm sure we can do better the applause. Avinash Vashisht, chairman and managing director, Accenture Services Private Limited. Ranjan Chowdhury, principal program development, NSTC. Ravi Pratap Singh, regional director, South Asia, AD Action International. And last but not the least, Matthew Spacey, founder and executive chairman, Magic Bus India Foundation. Over to Deepa.
Welcome to this session. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, great. I'm delighted to be moderating this session, and I'll do my best to keep these distinguished men in order. It's what we've done is, rather than having a lot of formal presentations, we've posed 3 questions to our panelists. And we'll do it in 2 rounds, which I hope will leave us enough time for an interaction with them. So each one of them is going to first talk about their own youth, since we were all young ones, and share a story or incident or something about what happened to them when they were young. Second is to talk about their program, and particularly features or stories that keep inspiring them about their program and why they're engaged in it. And then the third, once after this round is done, we'll come back and ask them to share with you one message that they want you to take away from this session to keep in mind as you go into your next breakaway sessions. Is that all right? Great. So we'll start with Stephen Fleming, who's the co-founder and chief executive of Kick for Life. It's a multi-award winning NGO which delivers a range of sports for development projects in Lesotho in southern Africa. And he's worked in other places as well. And he's also the author of 11 Stories of Development Through Football, which documents how football is being used around the world as a tool for social change. Steve.
Hi, everyone. pleasure to be here. This is my first time in India, so I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the beautiful country and eating some of the lovely food, and also the conference. I grew up playing a lot of sport in England, mainly football in the winter and then cricket in the summer. And at the time, I don't think I was really aware of the wider positive impact that it had on my life, such as good health, vibrant social networks. At the time, for me, it was just about having fun. And I think however complex our Sport for Development programs become, this really remains at the heart of their success. And it was my own personal love of sport which 10 years ago inspired me to come up with a bizarre challenge to dribble a football for 250 miles across Malawi in Africa, along with my brother. And it was fully meant as a one-off challenge. I wanted to do something which combined my interest in development with my love of sport. But it turned out to be a totally life-changing journey and adventure. And we saw during our challenge the real power of sport to engage young people. And it acted as a springboard to the setting up of Kick for Life. And 10 years later, today we have a team of 30 staff working in Lesotho, a small country in southern Africa, delivering a whole wide range of sport for development initiatives. So it's been a key part of my life for 10 years now, and I love working in this sector. So that brings me on to the next question. And there's two key evolutions of our project over the last 10 years that I'd like to mention. The first one is around the focus of our work. When we first went to Lesotho, it was very much about one particular issue. HIV is a major crisis in Lesotho. 23.6% of the population are infected. And I think as many young sport for development organisations do, they focus on one particular issue. And we did that, health education and HIV testing. But we quickly came to realise that particularly when you're working with the most vulnerable groups, such as children living on the street and vulnerable women, that just going on a health education course or being referred to treatment is not enough to change your life. And as a result, we gradually changed our approach to being much more holistic and intensive, and working with young people over the long term. And I guess the ultimate goal that we now have is to support our participants into sustainable livelihoods so that they can themselves go on to have a successful life where they can contribute back into the development of their own community. And the second evolution is around our understanding of the role of sport in what we do. At the beginning, it was very much just about being a methodology for our health education curriculum and as an engagement tool. But as our development programs have become more broad and more complex, we do, for example, things like intensive mentoring and referrals to other services. Involving sport in those parts isn't necessarily appropriate or needed. And as a result, football for us, sport in general, has become more of an environment, more of an organisational culture, something that defines the character of Kick for Life, so that when people come to us, they feel that they don't necessarily have to be playing sport, they always want to, but it's that environment which changes lives as much as the curriculum for us. And we've also recently started to embrace elite sport. I think sometimes in our sector we're quite worried about being seen to support young people who are going to be successful. Certainly for the first 7 or 8 years, we did everything we could to disassociate ourselves from supporting talented young people because we worried about how this would be perceived by funders and our audience. So we set up a football team called FC Kick for Life, but we didn't talk about it, we didn't really promote it at all. But in the last couple of years, the young people who play have achieved enormous success and they're now on the verge of being promoted to the Lesotho Premier League. And we found that the team has become a real asset for us. It generates income as a social enterprise. The players have become enormous role models, and it's given us great leverage for our message around the country as people are more interested in what we're doing. And we're actually now considering, at some point, repositioning ourselves from a traditional charity to a football club social enterprise that pursues success on the pitch, that pursues financial income, but for the ultimate goal of social change. And I think we need these kind of fresh thinking in our sector so that we don't always be a fringe activity, but that we knock down the barriers between sport for development and mainstream sport, so that actually we don't talk about sport for development, sport and development, but we talk about sport is development. And I think that's how we're going to really change lives on a great scale in the future.
If I may, just one follow-up question to you. I think this idea of having a football club social enterprise is brilliant. Is it boys or girls, men and women, or is it men?
It's both. Yeah, we work with a lot of girls and boys, roughly equal numbers. The boys team, naturally, as you'd expect in Africa, attracts more of the kind of attention. But our girls team are doing tremendously well, and I think, if anything, they're having a greater impact on the young people as role models. We've got a couple of stars in the making, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I'm going to now ask Brian Suskiewicz to speak. He is the Chief Executive Strategist for Coaches Across Continents and has worked in many different countries. In 2010, he joined this organization, and it operates in 20 countries with 51 implementing partner programs, educated over 2,000 coaches, and impacted over 170,000 children. So welcome.
Yep. Thank you. It's good to be back in India. We've got several partner programs here. Good to see several of them in attendance. So a little bit about myself. As was mentioned, I came from a very, very big football background, a soccer background in the United States at the university level. I was very fortunate that I got a bursary to college to play sport. I then became a university coach and was really successful on a lot of levels in terms of championships, developing players for the pros, even had a few players play in World Cup qualifiers with different countries. But I remember thinking to myself after about 10 years of that, is this it? And that's when I started getting involved with Coaches Across Continents as a volunteer at first, and now working with them full-time as the chief executive. And at Coaches Across Continents, there is a lot more than just playing the game or creating elite-level players. Everything that we do is about creating self-directed learners. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but a self-directed learner essentially is an independent thinker who can define and solve their own problems, who can reason logically, set goals and strategies to achieve those, and then they can reflect on their experiences and learn from them. And self-directed learning is really what we want to achieve, because that's going to create economic growth. It's going to create and solve a lot of problems locally and sustainably. So before that, though, I'm going to show a real quick video of me working in Cameroon. And I apologize, this was done on a handheld camera by one of our partner programs, but it's short and it's fun, so.
Hi, my name's Brian. I'm with Coaches Across Continents. At Coaches Across Continents, we specialize in training local coaches all over the world using sport for social impact. Here in Cameroon, right now, we're working in Boya. It's right at the base of Mount Cameroon. The coaches this week are learning different soccer-based games that teach about health and wellness, conflict resolution, HIV, female empowerment, and other topics such as alcoholism and games to protect against the environment. Our goal is that when we leave, these coaches will continue teaching these games to their players, and that our outreach will reach thousands and thousands of kids in Cameroon. Last year and this year, we've worked now in 3 different communities in Cameroon. We worked in Limbe, Boya, and Mamfe. And this year we've had a group join us from CFDP, which is out of Kumba, Cameroon, and they brought 10 coaches.
Diony Collins from Kumba, Cameroon Football Development Program, Director of Operations. I think the training session is very beneficial to CFDP because most of their drills are like professionally made for coaches in the 22nd century. Part of the program that we've been discussing, we've discussed gender equality, conflict resolution, physical fitness, health and wellness. Yeah, they are going to make our program even better because these are areas we have not gone into. The drills we have been doing here are very beneficial for CFDP.
Okay, so right before that I mentioned that we work on creating self-directed learners. And you saw a little bit in the video about how we do that. And again, we operate a little bit differently than most NGOs. We partner with local organizations all over the world. We have 5 that we work with here in India. But we work with groups in 20 countries. This year it'll probably be just under 30 countries when 2014 is all said and done. And I would expect that we'd top over 200,000 kids because we're going to reach this year over 3,000 coaches. And we focus on 4 main modules. And the key with these modules is all of the games that we play are very soccer-based games. And the games themselves are what's doing the educating. The first one is health and wellness, including HIV behavioral change. You already heard Steve mention that HIV is a big problem globally, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And we're finding now that besides learning the information about HIV by playing games, the kids are changing their behavioral change, and HIV rates are going down, especially in the countries where they've been traditionally the highest. So it's not just about telling people, have safe sex. It's about teaching them how to do that and why it's important. Another big one is female empowerment, including gender equity. We work in Kenya, in northern Kenya, and we work with a group where there's 100% female genital mutilation. And right now we're working with the young girls and the young boys in that community where we're questioning tradition, questioning culture through soccer, through football. The next one, conflict resolution, including social inclusion. We work, and it's important to note, we work with all of our groups on all 4 topics, but some groups, obviously, we have a bit more emphasis. In terms of conflict resolution, we work with former child soldiers. This year, we're going to work in Sierra Leone with single-leg amputees. We're going to work with a group that's going to work in Lebanon and Laos, victims of landmines. But it's all about behavioral change and getting people to think about how to solve their own problems. And then finally, we work a lot on life skills. It's very important to know that through football, you can give all children a voice, boys and girls. And when you give a child a voice, you give them a choice. You give them a choice to make their own decisions. You give them a choice when it comes to child rights and child protection. You give them a voice to speak up about what they want in this world and what they'd like to change. And ultimately, by going through those 4 modules, and how we do it is over a 3-year program with our local partners, is we hope to create these self-directed learners. And again, those are people that can identify their own problems and then come up and implement solutions to those problems. And it was mentioned on the very first introductory panel that when people are able to identify and solve their own problems, becomes locally relevant and locally sustainable. And then that's ultimately where long-term change is going to happen. And that's how we operate at Coaches Across Continents.
Thank you very much. We have a wonderfully diverse panel as well. Our next presenter is Avinash Vashisht, who's the chairman of and managing director of Accenture here in the private sector. A very distinguished background, has done all kinds of things. I'm not going to read them out because if he's the head of Accenture, he's done a lot of things.
Well, thank you, Deepa. Well, good afternoon to everyone. I think just thinking about my youth, I think before that, I started thinking about the youth of my kids. I think this is a very digital age today. And I think this word digital, if you haven't really heard about it, you'll hear more and more. Today we have social networking, mobility, which is basically a mobile device. Everyone is using mobile device. People use things on the internet where, you really have those services being delivered out of the cloud, if you may. And whether you know it or not, but companies are using a lot of this data to make analysis and getting insights of the buying behavior of you as consumers and so on and so forth. All of this stuff is really what makes the digital age. As a parent of 3 kids, 2 daughters and 1 son, I think I have, I have been able to kind of say to them in some sense, kids, be creative in what you do, think innovatively and pursue your dreams. And I think I measure myself based on some of those words for my kids. But looking back into my youth, into my growing up, I think things were extremely different. Studying was the most important thing, and everything else was a distraction. And the next year I moved into a different part of the hostel, and all of these guys were only focused on study, and here I was a very studious person. So I think, that amazing in terms of how you go through it and how does the peer influence, make a difference. My dad was probably my mentor as I was growing up, very visionary guy. And, we are 4 brothers. 2 of them are, did engineering and did, MBA, and, like myself, my other brother is also a chief executive in the US. And then, 2 doctors. So I think they did pretty good in that sense. I think growing up, I would say, I would hear quite a bit now from my brothers that, you were the eldest in the family, and you were a big role model for us. And when you did well, we had more pressure to do as well as you did. But anyways, looks like all 4 of them, all of us shaped up very well. But if you look at today in the corporations, for example, Accenture in India is over 90,000 people in India, and we're growing very, very well. In fact, the growth has returned, so we will get into that 100,000 people plus very quickly. It's a large organization. For us in Accenture, it's very, very important to be able to engage, with these 90,000 plus people. Very, very important. And also for us to be able to see as to how we can develop leadership within the organization. And especially in India, I think the women leaders have a challenge. And again, India is not particularly different than the rest of the world, but I think in India, it's pretty common to have an employee, manager come in and say she's getting married and she will leave work, or she's pregnant and she's going to be a mother and she'll leave work. I think, the companies today, including Accenture, have a lot that is out there to be able to motivate these people to continue in the work. But I think we as managers at times do not really use that tools enough to be able to encourage and keep these leaders, women leaders, engaged. I think one of the things that I tell myself and I try to tell my leadership team is you need to ask a person, a women manager, 10 times why. I mean, if it's about not being able to come to work, fine, we'll restructure your work. And basically you can stay home. Well, you can't devote 8 hours, no problem. You can devote 4 hours, fine. So it's, and it is not very difficult today. Even though we are over 90,000 people, we're growing well. I think the number of people, experienced and skilled people that any company needs anywhere in the world is a lot more. I think the figure that I have to remember, and Ranjan is sitting over here, 2030, India will create or add to the workforce by 249 million people. The second largest country will add about 19 million people to the workforce, and that's Pakistan. China will deplete its workforce by the same time, 2030, by 10 million people. So if you look at it, I think India has a very, very big opportunity in terms of what it can do for India and the world. At the same time, we need to be able to find employment for all these people that will be added to the workforce. I think I was talking to Tessa earlier today, and she was mentioning about the Magic Bus program where 14-year-old girls, the average rate for them to still be in school is about 19% in India. But the girls that are in the Magic Bus program, that rate is 98%. Amazing. Very well done, Matthew. And I think if we can take some of those, and some of the challenges that she was talking about is not very different of what the challenges that our women leaders face in the corporate world itself. It's about engaging. It's about really trying to figure out as to how you can keep them engaged. And I think there's a lot of learning that you can get from this program. In fact, I've been a big admirer of Magic Bus for quite some time. So right now, Magic Bus and Accenture are trying to work out a way to bring the kind of engagement model that is there in Magic Bus to our program in Accenture. In fact, we have a program which we run globally called Skills to Succeed. It's about skilling people of employable age for a job. And I think what I really find is you can probably train a person for a job, but how do you keep the person engaged to develop and make a career out of it? And I think some of the things that Magic Bus has been able to do can really translate very well into the corporate world. In terms of sports, I think it's a great equalizer in that sense. I was just there playing golf tournament this Saturday, and the format of that golf tournament was Texas Scramble. That's the same format we use even for the Accenture golf tournaments in India. And it's so nice because I'm not a very good golf player at all. But I don't find it difficult, I don't find it embarrassing to play that format. It's about the team of 4 people trying to have fun while they're playing golf. It works on the fact about strengths of the people and doesn't really pound on the weaknesses that the other team members have. It's about trying to decide which of the shots of the each and every player you take. It's a very, very collective effort, but it is a format that really encourages you to work as a team and have fun. Cricket, for example, and Bollywood are absolute, great stuff. It connects with people in India emotionally. When I look at the Korean companies, they have really taken that and connected with India. I was in Japan talking to some of the CEOs in Japan. I said, we were trying to find the differences between Korean and Japanese companies. That's one of the things is all the ads for Korean companies would be on cricket and Bollywood. And while the Japanese ad would simply be, this is a product and these are the 100 features of the product. So I think, so in this particular case, a great connect. Again, if you look at, basketball in the US, for example, and again, soccer has been also very, very popular in the US, even though it's not known as a soccer playing country, but if some of you saw the movie Bend It Like Beckham, it talks about soccer scholarship for women being, in the U.S. being kind of the #1 place. I think the game has really become very, very important today. I see in corporates today, we are engaging with our clients at least, with sports as a very, very good platform. And I think going further, India has never really engaged in sports. It's good to see all of you guys take the time to be over here to talk about how sports has been used to develop the youth and make an impact other places. And I hope a lot that we would do the same. I have a personal agenda over here because my son just loves to be in sports, and he says, Dad, I want to pursue football as my career. And I said, fine, done. And I think that's what I'm supporting. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Some very interesting ideas that we'll come back to. Next speaker needs no introduction. Matthew. You heard from him in the morning, so I will not repeat all his claims to fame. He's founded the Magic Bus Foundation. If you book online, he also founded ClearTrip, and has been. I think this morning one of the speakers was talking about. I think it was Vijaya Amritraj about determination, dedication, discipline. And I think Matthew in his journey in taking Magic Bus to where it is has exemplified that.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you. This is actually, unfortunately, the second time I've had to follow Avinash because actually I have had a spectacular story of underachievement as a young person. So I think we last spoke at TED in Jaipur together. But actually, before I speak about, perhaps just the origins of why we do what we do now, and is I'd just like to pick up on what you said as well, because I think, I hope in the plenary sessions, in the breakout sessions afterwards, that we do spend a little bit of time. We're in India at the moment, and we do have this extraordinary situation which you spoke about, this demographic blip, which some people call a dividend, and others are perhaps more realistic about what might be about to happen. And it's something in India we don't talk about very much because I think people are very scared about what's about to happen in India. Already 50% of our population are below 40. We see this. In fact, I read in the magazine recently that in the next 15 years at the current trajectory, India will have 425 million people unemployed or underemployed. So we've got a really big problem. That it's what young people and youth are facing today. And I think one of the discussions I'd like to also have today is why it's different, not just in India, but in many countries now, I think, with young people. And, in the last 30 years, the income levels in India have increased tenfold, something that took the UK 150 years to do. But more importantly, things like mobile phones. In India now, we have 900 million mobile phones. I can guarantee that pretty much every one of the Magic Bus participants now has a phone in their hand. We have 300 million people who have televisions. We're talking about similar levels of internet access. So aspiration levels are greatly changing. And I think this really sets the tone really for the importance now of really addressing youth and really, I think it's not going to be a luxury anymore in India. I can fully understand why there might be a great deal of social unrest. When we talk to Magic Bus young people, and we've just launched this incredible tool, a youth barometer. So every quarter we ask our 10,000 youth leaders, what do you feel about your lives and your aspirations? And they don't want to be cleaners. They don't want to be drivers. They want to work in an office. They want to have a car. They want to be married. They don't want to be in that slum. And so we have this spectacular problem of not just there being hundreds of millions of young people, but their aspiration levels are dramatically changing. And this is playing out for us in India here. And unfortunately, it's not, I hope, as bad as those of our international guests read about. We hear about some spectacular problems we have with gender and young people now, and the Delhi rape which happened. In Delhi, over the last 2 years, the reported rape and sexual abuse has increased by 400%. And so actually, someone just handed me this piece of paper, and in our last youth barometer, it said that 46% of women say that mobility, physical mobility, is what they perceive as the biggest difference between them and their youth male equivalent. So these are having huge impacts on the way that we are able to interact and work with young people. So I wanted to sort of just go off track a little bit there, because I do think it's such a pertinent subject at the moment, and as I said, one that I think definitely transcends borders. The Magic Bus model, I won't spend more than a minute on this, but essentially, what we try to understand, and this journey that we use is a metaphoric journey of childhood to livelihood, 8 to 18, and started really out of complete failure on my part, because when I started Magic Bus, I naively thought that the young men that I was coaching rugby to at the time would be really thrilled if I got them all a job. And within 2 months, every single one of those young people had resigned, ran away, didn't want to work anymore. So it was good learning for me. I had my Western filter on, thinking I was really doing a good job. And this really made me reflect on all the things that a child needs to go through in order to be a successful young person. And that's as true for anyone sitting in this room as it is for a Magic Bus young person or a person in any one of the programs across the world. And if you can understand that, then for me I thought, really what is a really wonderful opportunity with the lens of working with youth was to try and create ecosystems around development. I think Sport for Development has this amazing opportunity to be agnostic. I bet you every one of you who runs programs, you probably have a very good sense of your outcomes, but you can't by yourself. So I think someone said this morning, we need partners to finish our work. We do. It's behavioral change. So it's imperative that we go the last mile and we link up with partners, those assets, those resources that exist in the communities that we work with across the world. And so which partner wouldn't want to work with an organization that could get girls to want to go to school, or to get girls to want to take iron tablets, or to get a fantastic pipeline into vocation training programs? So really we've at Magic Bus talk about this ecosystem and this journey from childhood to livelihood really by leveraging what's already out there. By the silver bullet is that we have this amazing army of 10,000 young people that on average do 9 hours a week, and we'll perhaps talk a little bit about the assumptions we make about youth later, but 9 hours a week. Our attrition rate, I think, is about 5%, so they do it for free, they want to do it, they ask somebody in their community and they deliver the curricula to younger children within their own programs, and they stay with us for a very long time. Again, an assumption, that I made was that why would they do this? It's not, people who live in poverty. Why would they have 9 hours? And really a massive learning was that these young people actually don't want to live in poverty, and they want to help their communities get out of poverty. And it's something we often take for granted, I think, even at Magic Bus. These young people actually, when you empower them, and it's about a word you've written a whole book on, but when you empower them, they do want to be the heroes. They do want to be somebody. They do want to affect change in their community. And I think we often are misguided in the assumption that we have to provide service all the time. So really, that's the sort of I think the burning issue for us. I guess just in terms of, I said, I know this is not the message, but I think I think with the youth that we work with, and obviously we're trying to ramp up now. It's our end game, if you like, at Magic Bus. The biggest metric is about getting young people either in further education or in employment. Is that there's no inevitability to this. I think we all sit down and we work with lots of young people and we think, okay, there's an inevitability about people moving out of poverty, or there's an inevitability about solving something, and it's not. And I think that's something that we often forget. It's not automatic that we're going to solve this problem, and therefore we need to be worried about how we look after our youth, certainly in South Asia at the moment, and I'm sure that's across borders. And the second thing, and the last thing I'd say is that, and what we've learned at Magic Bus is that it's not just about financial security. It's a huge part to play in poverty alleviation, but by itself it doesn't work. It has to be about quality of life. You have to provide young people with the frameworks that they can take better choices, have more control in their lives, access those opportunity structures. So these things don't just happen. There has to be process behind them. And I think this is really what we've tried to focus on with the youth.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthew. I think both those, the words from Avinash and Matthew set the stage very nicely to introduce Ranjan Chowdhury, who's the Principal Program Development Person for the National Skills Development Corporation. Prior to joining NDSC, Ranjan's been an entrepreneur and has headed the Vocational Training Institute at the Godfrey Phillips Group. And in his current program, we've been challenging him to think even more broadly than he already is. So I hope we'll bring that up in discussion. He has a background in business administration and a bachelor's from St. Stephen's College. So he's a local boy.
Thank you, Deepa. It's not very often that I get to interact with an audience such as today. And while I may have studied in Delhi, I'm born and brought up in a place called Patna. And to give you a little bit about the school that I went to, it was a Jesuit institution. And the ratio of built-up area in terms of the school buildings vis-a-vis the playing grounds was at least 1:15 or 1:20. If memory serves me right, we had about 5 to 6 playing fields. Some could accommodate 2 football fields. And for us in school, co-curricular activities was as part of academics and in fact encouraged. Went through my first 18 years playing every conceivable game that school had to offer. Apart from that, outside, everything ranging, and I'm not sure whether some of you would even know of this, of gilli danda and marbles, but it was great fun, and it all shaped for me being the person I am today. What did I have to show for all the games and sports that I played? Do I have a cupboard full of medals? No. Sorry to disappoint you, not a single one. But it did teach me a few lessons, and which continues to hold good today. And of course, torn ligaments in my left knee, which continues to bother me every once in a while. That's the legacy that I have. But what sports did teach me is the fact that, Winning and losing is the flip side of the same coin, and working together in teams. A little bit about the organization that I represent. The National Skill Development Corporation is a rather unique entity in the sense that it's a government startup. It's funded by the government, but is a Section 25 not-for-profit private sector enterprise, because 51% of the shares are held by 10 different chambers of commerce and industry association. We were set up as a consequence of the National Skills Policy of 2009, which re-looked at the challenges that the youth of India were facing. Historically, if you were to look at vocational education and training in India, it was a government, it was supposed to be the responsibility of the government. We had the various ITIs and polytechnics that you all would be familiar with. But as the years went by, the needs, industry evolved, the needs for talent changed dramatically, but somehow the ITIs and the polytechnics and all did not keep pace. So there was a great disconnect with the institutions that were supposed to train manpower and talent to take up the positions that were open in terms of jobs and other earning opportunities. Also, going forward, much of the opportunities was in the private space, and hence the government felt that it was imperative for the private sector to come forward and pick up and address this challenge of making sure that the youth are empowered to take up opportunities going forward. As an organization, our role is to encourage private sector players, and they range from entrepreneurs to established corporates to not-for-profits to educational institutions to come forward to set up capacity to train the youth going forward. We have more than 100 partners today who are there in more than 350 districts of the country. They cater to school dropouts, all the way up to engineering graduates, all of whom who need a skill quotient to make them capable enough to take up the opportunities that are out there. We also work in a number of other ways to address the ecosystem. I'll talk about a little bit at a later point of time. But one of the things in the ecosystem that we're very focused about is to work with the government to create pathways, both in terms of career and academic pathways. The challenge with India is that a very large percentage of youth drop out of the formal education system. And there are very few avenues for them to get back on board to continue the academic pathways as it exists today. But we have worked with the government, and what was notified last December was something called the National Skills Qualification Framework. Very simply put, it's a 10-level architecture which maps both the vocational stream and the academic and the equivalence, and allows youth to take up education and also some of their work experience into break it up into bite-sized chunks and continue on a pathway, get off and on as they feel good. This is important because at times the economic pressures on most children in India make it imperative for them to take up a source of living to support their families. I think I'll stop now and look at some of the other challenges and how to. Also, before I finish, numbers were mentioned, in terms of the millions who will get added to the job force as we go forward. But just to give you a perspective, at times it's difficult to comprehend the hundreds of millions who are going to be added to the job force. But to take it in a slightly different perspective, what we are looking at is almost 1 million young Indians joining the workforce every month month on month for the next 20 years.
The numbers in terms of the millions who are both unskilled and who will be looking for employment, and also those who graduate from engineering colleges and other colleges who are still unemployable, is really very difficult. I'm wondering if you want to say anything, comment on, as an employer, on skills, and any comments on feedback to NSDC or any programs. I understand Accenture has just recently done a report. Before we lose that connection, then we'll come back to you.
Hello. Yeah, we work pretty extensively with NSDC, and I think if we're to look at, we recently concluded a program with NSDC called UDAN for Jammu and Kashmir, and our rate for being able to skill them right, because we helped design the program, and we worked with partners to be able to train those people. And we were able to get those people into Accenture jobs. I think out of the entire batch, only one person we couldn't, and that was not because they were not qualified, but because they had to go back to GNK. So the rate was pretty much 100% really. And that's a rate that has not necessarily been there, because we also manage the other UDAN programs as well. It has not been there. And I think for us it was great learning, because it looks like we did all the right things. And the whole idea is right now to be able to see as to what is it that we did right, and what can we do then to take those things back into other programs with NSDC for others. So that's an obligation. But it's so important right now to be able to kind of skill the people. In fact, if you were to go to an NSDC meeting, you would have all the CEOs from the respective industry out there. Everyone is saying the same thing, is we need skilled people. So whether it is construction workers, who could do plumbing or electricity stuff, or mechanical guys, to people who can actually run core business process for clients in India and globally, to the IT stuff. I think it's the same thing. Today, for example, out of the engineering colleges, about 25% of the engineers that graduate get employed by companies like ourselves. That's really not acceptable. We need to be able to increase that to twice as much. And I think so this is where the scaling is very, very important.
Let's move on to our last speaker before I come in. Ravi Pratap Singh. He's the Regional Director for South Asia for the A-Day Action International. He's based in Sri Lanka. This is a Geneva-based organization, works in 32 countries. And their goal is to reach children in skills development. They've reached over 1 million children, and 250,000 youth have been, they've been able to place in education, and assuming once the placement is done, they've held the jobs down. We were having an interesting discussion, which I think is relevant to the broader role of sports in development, which is the role of non-technical skills, life skills, behavioral skills that help people, the cultural skills that enable people to fit into and work in different environments successfully. Because we as middle-class people assume that what we are raised with is the norm, so we don't have to work hard in fitting in. Those are skills we grow up with. But someone coming from a deprived background or a different background doesn't have those skills. So I think one of the issues that we were discussing with Ranjan was the role of what you would call life skills, behavioral skills that would help people make effective use of technical education or any kind of formal education. Over to you.
Thank you, teacher. My younger days when I was growing up were not very different from many others in my age. And as in the morning, it was said that, in India, there's a very popular saying and belief that खेलोगे कूदोगे बनोगे खराब
padhoge, likhoge, banoge nawab. Means if you study well, you will rule the world. But if you get into sports and games and all that, you're good for nothing. Means you'll end up being good for nothing. So that has been part of my life when I was growing up. But instinctive thing, children go for sports, so I was not very different. But as many others, I had to also, my aspirations were driven by my parents' aspirations mostly. And in those days, I think there were two aspirations of parents. Either you become doctor or engineer. This is, I'm talking of late 70s, early 80s in India. So, I followed their aspirations. I became engineer. They were happy. Now, whenever I went out to, play cricket, as in India, cricket is a very popular game, and I used to love playing cricket. So one day my father had a long session with me. He told me that, if you promise me to become Sunil Gavaskar, means those who know cricket would know Gavaskar is like Platini and Pele in football. Then it's okay, you can go and enjoy your cricket, otherwise you focus on your studies. Now, at that time I didn't have guts to say that yes, I can become Sunil Gavaskar. So I focused on my studies, but I must tell you, when I moved out of, away from my parents to do my graduation, that was the time when I got some opportunities of free spaces where I could play cricket, play badminton, and I was very happy that I was part of the university team in cricket and so on. But when I look back, even at that time I used to experience that the education which I enjoyed during my graduation and post-graduation period was much, much, much more than what I was doing in school. And probably if you look at percentage as the parameter, I didn't do much better in that sense. I used to get around 80% schools. I ended up with 76, 80% in university. But the manner in which I enjoyed my studies was primarily because I was also enjoying my game, my sports, and so on. Now, that also gave me very important lesson in life. That when we are growing up, everyone needs to have some space of his or her own, and that's very important. So when some 5.5 years back I joined this organization, A-Day Action, in the leadership position, I was told that we have, because this organization focuses on education, and vocational education is one of the 9 streams of our works. In vocational education we are doing great. It is our flagship program. We have trained so many, lakhs, thousands of youth, and so on. So with my team, I had some questions. I said, okay, what is the kind of placement we have? So they very proudly said we have 76% of placement, which is, I think, highest amongst all the players who are in this game. And then I had extensive discussions